found a property just across the bay, which was for sale. It was the original guy who'd started Alcan Aluminium in Australia, so he was super wealthy. It was his holiday home. And we negotiated on that at $230,000, and it was a double block. Now, we couldn't afford the block next door, which he also owned. So, again, like every ethnic family, my father bought the block next door.
This is Property Investory, where we talk to successful property investors to find out more about their stories, mindset, and strategies. I'm Taran Shum, and in this episode on Property Investory, we're speaking with Ian Ugarte, part owner of Small is the New Big, consultant and real estate advisor. Beginning work as a plumber after high school, his path led him to teaching before taking on property investing full-time, and with great success. So, what does he do in any given day?
My day is made up of, it can be very varied, and that's the sort of person I am. I do like different things. You know, we've started many businesses over 22 years, so 23 businesses in 23 years we're up to. And for me, a daily basis is getting up. We have a 2-acre water frontage on the Sunshine Coast. Currently, right now, I'm sitting down by the river just looking out, talking to you, obviously, Tyron. I will normally venture into the office for the actually get up about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'll enter emails for about 45 minutes. I will do a jog somewhere between 7 to 36k, depending on what my training is for a marathon. Come back, have a shower, get the kids to school, drive them to school. I'm one of those fathers that drops kids off. And then I'm in the office for 2-3 hours at tops. And then the rest of the day I take it pretty easy. So we've got an office there that is full of staff that look after what we do. And I'm very gracious that they're there, and my wife obviously running the whole business. I'm not a late sleeper, so I normally will try to get in bed by 8:30 when the kids go to bed. Obviously, there's times where we've got certain projects underway, or webinars that I've got to run, or teach some people doing some things, and I might get to bed at 11:30, 12:30. I can survive on 4 hours sleep for probably a month, and then I'll need to do what we call sleep bank and get back into the groove of just that running. So I do love my running, and I do love my exercise. I don't love it while I'm exercising, but geez, I like the finish line when I'm done.
As a property investor, consultant and real estate advisor, he also works with his wife Christine in their company Small is the New Big, which helps create affordable housing opportunities in Australia.
My property title is what we call in my community the MOTU, or the Master of the Universe. So I'm my own little He-Man, and I do like a bit of a laugh. So my community understands that for most of the time we're out having a good time, and obviously the serious part of investing and how we can help out other people, not just ourselves, and community in general.
Passionate about running marathons, Ugarte got into it later in life when he was able to run with Kathy Freeman in New York.
So I've done currently 9 marathons. I did my first at the age of 39. I am one of only 1,000 people in the world that have completed the 6 world major marathons, which includes New York, Chicago, Tokyo, London, Boston, and New York. Did I say New York? There's another one in there. There's 6 of them in total. I've now done that. I'm actually going off and now doing the 6 continents. The 7 continents. And now I've got 3 more continents left. I'm doing Antarctica in March. In late next year, I will also do South America, and I've got to fit in an African, and which the African will be my finale, I think, which will be doing 6 marathons over 7 days across the Moroccan desert. It's one of the hardest marathons in the world. When we changed the way we were doing property and actually started to get to the point of what we would refer to as success, that was probably in about 2009, 2010. And I'd never really run more than 10 kilometres at any one time. And I'm sitting there in a lounge room, and Robert Di Castello was being interviewed, and he'd just started what they call the Indigenous Marathon Project. And what he does is he goes into remote Aboriginal communities. He does the Deadly Run series, which is, they take 5K runs. And then from that, people apply to become part of the Indigenous Marathon Project. Over 6 months, they train them up to become marathon runners, and they end up going over to New York and completing the marathon. Now, for me, I listened to that story and I watched it. If you've ever seen, I think it's called Running to America. It's on the ABC. It's an ABC documentary. And every person that's gone over since 2010, it's usually a team of somewhere between 7 to 15 people, and has completed the marathon. And from that, what happens is they're promoting the locals in the community that can actually show, and they don't have to be the fit and healthiest people. They have to be leaders in the community that will be seen to be leaders. And they go off and they do the marathon, they come back, and they are absolute rock stars. And the change of health, the huge amount of diabetes problems in remote communities at the moment is huge. Kathy Freeman, for those people that didn't know, after winning the gold in Sydney, had actually got into a place of type 2 diabetes, and she went over in 2012 to complete the marathon, and that was obviously the year that New York got called off. That was going to be my first marathon, and I got to run around because I was supporting the Indigenous Marathon Project as a charity. I got to run around Central Park in New York with Kathy Freeman and Robert D. Costella, and people say to me, "Did you get a photo?" I go, "I don't need a photo. Like, until I get Alzheimer's, I'm going to remember that day for a long time." And so, that's a long story, but that's how I got into running.
Growing up in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, he initially entered into the plumbing profession on completing high school.
I came from a good middle-class family. My parents are Spanish immigrants, came to Australia in the 1970. I was born in 71. I was born in 73. And, my dad became the first Australian qualified plumber that was a migrant. So he actually went through the TAFE course as the first person, and he had a good set of skill sets from being a boilermaker over in Spain. And so we grew up quite happily in the family as plumbers. My brother, I have an older brother who's 9 years older than me, and a younger sister who's 7 years younger. And so there was a fair distance between my sister and my brother. And my brother, when he got to age, became a plumber as well. When I got to the age of leaving school, I went to year 12. I said to my dad, "Do you mind if I become a plumber? Because I don't really want to go to university." And my dad said, "Well, as long as you finish year 12, I'm quite happy for you to become a plumber. And it's not what I want you to do, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine."
With the instrumental aid of his parents, he then saved to buy his first property on a very small salary.
And my first property investment was at the age of 19, and I was earning $222 a week in hand after tax. And my parents, as a technical, as a Chew ethnic family, my parents put a deposit down on the house across the road. And ultimately, it was meant for me to move into with my then first long-term girlfriend. And so I lived at home, I worked with the business, I didn't get paid any overtime whatsoever, but my parents did put a deposit on a house for me, and it was costing, we were putting at the time, and this is 1992, I think it was, I was putting $200 of my $222 of wage into that property, and I still managed by the end of the year to save $800. So I was a handy little saver when it came to it. Now, I always wanted waterfront property, and when it comes to waterfront property in Sydney at the time, when I wanted to buy close to water, at least water views, was going to cost me $500,000 to $550,000, and that was around the Maroubra area. And we think back at those times at $550,000, I would have mortgaged about 10 of them if we knew what Sydney was going to do. Because to buy something in Maroubra similar currently nowadays, I'd probably have to spend $3 to $3.5 million. But we took a trip one day up the coast towards Central Coast, and we stopped at a place called Burrell Waters. We went into the shop by the wharf, and we looked in the shop, and the house for sale for $230,000. And we go, "Geez, that's cheap. That's waterfront property for $230,000, an hour away from Sydney. This has got to be something that we've got to look at." So within a couple of weeks, we'd actually moved into a property that was for sale. So it was my first negotiation in property, really. And all the deals that Christina and I have, I can honestly say, hand on my heart, that 100% of all the property deals we've done have never been a standard contract deal. We've never had a standard 6-week contract or a standard term because we've always had some sort of condition in it. Now, this particular property we'd agreed to look at and purchase as long as we could rent it for 3 months to make sure that we could handle the area.
However, there turned out to be an issue with this property which would make living in it impracticable for Ugarte.
This property was great, which we had a 3-month conditional clause in there. We moved in on the Saturday. On the Sunday, I was a semi-professional soccer player, a football player, and so I was in a semi-professional contract. On the Saturday, we moved in. Sunday, we went out, first game of the season, and tore my cruciate ligament. And that was really the reason we didn't end up purchasing that property, because there was 89 steps to get from the bottom of the river all the way up to the top. So in the meantime, of the 3 months, we found a property just across the bay, which was for sale. It was the original guy who'd started Alcan Aluminium in Australia, so he was super wealthy. It was his holiday home. And we negotiated on that at $230,000. And it was a double block. Now, we couldn't afford the block next door, which he also owned. So, again, like every ethnic family, my father bought the block next door. and you can imagine, so, we're an ethnic family, and as Christine's an Australian, true blue Australian, and she was going, what the hell is going on here? The in-laws are moving in next door. This is full on. So we end up going down. And again, it was probably one of those first properties where we learnt a lot, because the first thing we did was, before we went during our 5-day cooling off period, we got the council to come in and look at the property. Now, it was an original fisherman's shack, and downstairs was a bar area and lounge room, and upstairs was 2 bedrooms plus bathroom. It's quite a small place. And when the council came in, they said, you know what, it's under height here. Your downstairs area, and it was an original fisherman's cottage. They'd sort of dug out and excavated underneath and put a slab down, but it didn't actually meet building height and code. So the council said to us, look, we can't make downstairs habitable. You can only really live upstairs. So we went back to the owners and we said to the owners, look, it's not legal. We need to renegotiate the price. We've had some pricing to actually jack the house up and get it back to its proper height so that we can live downstairs as well. And we negotiated, I think it was about $20,000 off the purchase price. And we ended up in a position where it cost us $7,000 to jack the house up, get it to the right height, and get going again. So it was really great that we were managed to negotiate fairly early on.
So with his parents' help, he paid down the debt and bought his first home in Barrel Waters.
And the way that we got into that property was at that original house that my parents put the deposit on across the road in East Lakes. We sold that, and the market had gone up in value. And having paid down the debt a little bit, we ended up with $60,000 of the deposit, which that was after I paid my parents back with interest. So it wasn't one of those freebies that my parents sort of donated money to me. They did help me, and absolutely, I love my parents to pieces for what they, sorry, Tom, I get really emotional at different stages, depending on who we're talking about, and I don't hide that emotion. I'm very happy to show it. It's a true essence of how I really feel about some of the things I talk about, and they just work so hard, and they continue. My dad is over the age of 70, and he works so hard. He just makes me feel so inadequate when I go and work with him, because I might be working with him for 2 or 3 days, just helping me out doing things, and he puts me to shame. Honestly, it's just such an amazing person to watch. And so East Lakes is what we bought as an investment property, basically. And my parents put the deposit down. We then sold that property a few years later, which gave us the deposit to be able to go up to Barrel Waters and buy our first home.
Before becoming a full-time property investor, Ugarte worked in plumbing, where he was actually able to use his skills to compete for the Olympics of work skills.
I got to a point where when we first moved down there, I was working with my father. I was at the point there, 24, 25, 26. So I just had got my plumbing license. So essentially, I moved down there, and during my time as an apprentice plumber, I was a competitor in what they called at the time work skills, which is now called World Skills. And it's a skill-based competition for all trades. And you compete at regional level. If you're in regional, you go to national level. If you're in the national level, you end up going and competing against other countries, and you can win gold medals like the Olympics. So it'll be the Skill Olympics that you'd be attending. Now, I won a silver medal in the Australians, so I didn't get the gold, and that it wasn't meant to be.
Coming up after the break, we'll delve further into Ugarte's journey on the progression of his career.
And within 8 weeks, I actually applied for a job, which was just a pie-in-the-sky job, which was the Assistant Director of Business, which was a 3 IC of TAFE New South Wales, Sydney Institute, and I got the job.
How he got into property investing full-time.
And my father bought property at peaks twice and lost money on both of them. And so I thought I'd just follow suit and do exactly the same.
And that's next. I'm Tyrone Shum, and you're listening to Property Investory. Western Australia is tipped to be the next property hotspot. If you're looking to invest and build in WA, take advantage of the affordable land market and record build times with Plunket Homes. Visit propertyinvestory.com/build to find out why they're WA's most established home builder. With over 150 years of experience, Plunket Homes helps you develop turnkey homes across WA. To get your fixed price demolition or site works and to maximise profits and minimise time, visit propertyinvestory.com/build. And now back to the show. From plumbing, Ugarte diverted his career into a slightly different direction, which allowed him to impart his knowledge to others.
Up till recently, I didn't realise, but up till recently, I've always been a teacher. I only realised it recently that I am a teacher. So every time an apprentice came on for my dad, I would always be the one teaching. And one of the TAFE guys that was involved with World Skills said to me, "You know what, we need some younger people coming in. Would you mind doing some part-timing?" I said, "I don't mind doing some part-timing at all." I was literally probably only had my licence for a couple of weeks, and I was probably one of the youngest teachers within TAFE New South Wales at the age of 24. So I was doing some part-time work, and essentially that led up to me being able to do part-time work, which paid for our mortgage. So my time within the part-time ranks would pay for the mortgage, which meant that any work that I did within our own businesses would go towards being able to, live our life, basically. So our mortgage was taken care of by TAFE. I then became a full-time teacher in TAFE New South Wales after doing some volunteer work in a place called Woojul in Cape York, where we built a tourist shack and toilet for a local Aboriginal community that were doing tours to waterfalls. And so they needed somewhere where they could take the white people to, and so they could go to the bathrooms rather than going into their community, and came back, got my TAFE New South Wales full-time teaching job. I then became an acting head teacher in plumbing and a full-time teacher in plumbing, so head teacher in plumbing. And that was great.
Leaving no stone unturned, he then progressed within TAFE New South Wales before eventually beginning property investing full-time.
Just out of the blue one day, starting to work on my motivations of doing the same thing over and over again, which is what you have to do in property. Find your success, find your bread and butter, do it over and over again. And over a period of 8 weeks, I just worked on doing the same thing. And that was, answering emails at the same time of the day, making sure I answered phone calls at the same time of the day, make sure I put appointments in at a certain time of day. And within 8 weeks, I actually applied for a job, which was just a pie-in-the-sky job, which was the Assistant Director of Business, which was a 3 IC of TAFE New South Wales, Sydney Institute. And I got the job. So I took 7 pay scale hits in one single leap, and I walked into an office at the age of 36 with the nearest person to me being 20 years my senior, and fit in really well, and really had a great time. And that was really my last job before I left TAFE New South Wales and became full-time property investor.
Jumping into property investing full-time, Ugarte wasn't fully prepared for what to buy in terms of gearing.
And my father bought property at peaks twice and lost money on both of them. And so I thought I'd just follow suit and do exactly the same. So I had it. So we were full-time in Browse. So we were the first of a young generation moving into that area. It had been holiday homes for a long time, mostly older people, and we were the first couple to arrive. And within 6 months, there was probably another 6 young couples that said, you know what, this is good value for money. I'm moving from Sydney and I'm moving up here full-time. And the house next door was put up for sale and an accountant bought it, who's still my accountant. And about 2 years into him having that as a holiday house, I rang him and said, listen, we're moving back to Sydney. I found a factory. I'm going to do a factory conversion, and I'm going to sell Berowra, and I'm going to use that as a deposit for buying this factory. And it was in Botany, this factory. Maury was his name. Maury still is his name. Maury rings me back after 5 minutes. He says, mate, you don't need to sell it. What I want you to do is go and see the bank manager, refinance against Berowra Water. It's gone up in value. Take that, put a deposit on over there. It'll be cash flow neutral, and you can still continue to stay at Berowra Waters, and in the next few years you can develop the one in Botany. I went, that's a great idea. That's the sort of accountant I want. Now, as it turns out, what I thought was mutually geared, it was mutually geared as long as we only took into consideration the cost of the money that was on the mortgage of the factory. What I hadn't counted was that the money that we'd taken out of our own home was costing us money, right? So I'd never actually factored that in. So it was negative geared. It was negative geared by about $8,000 a year. Now, we were struggling for money. So I was thinking, this is absolutely crazy. I'm struggling for money. Obviously, I'm paying way too much tax. Even after negative gearing, I still haven't got enough money. So what I'll need to do is go out and find another negative geared property. I'm going to buy another one so I've got more money at the end of the year, and then my tax problems have disappeared and I've got more money in the bank account.
With this adversity, he learned to identify the difference between a good and bad investment. He believes this is an issue many of his clients experience as well.
And so lo and behold, after only buying into 7 different properties, we were at $36,000 negative cash flow. And at that point in time, I was on $96,000 wage. So when you look at that, we had $96,000 of wage. Take some tax off that, we're about $66,000. Take the negative gearing of $36,000 off that, we were down to $30,000. And at the time, we had 3 kids. So 3 children, a wife to feed, and myself on $30,000 a year, and our breath was holding out for the end of financial year so that we could get out of our 36, we might get $10,000 or $12,000 back. And all it did was, just to see that check, and those are days where you actually got a check from the ATO, and I'd look at that $12,000 and I'd just breathe a sigh of relief and I'd go, right, all right, we're good now. We'll be able to survive the next 2 or 3 months without having any problems. And all that check did was actually pay for the next lot of negative gearing anyway. And it was just this vicious circle. And it was really quite painful to go through. And it was quite demanding on our relationship. And we never actually really got to the crux at that point in time of why we never had any money. But I wasn't ever focused on money. It wasn't a big thing. The only focus I had on money is how little we had in the bank account, not where it was actually really going. And it's actually something that we see a lot with the clients that we work with on a daily basis, that they never actually stop enough to say, where am I spending my money and what is a good investment, as opposed to a bad investment. Now, I know that there's plenty of investors out there that say negative gearing is a good thing. I will never, ever, ever negative gear again unless I'm buying a property for a specific reason for a year or 2 because I'm going to develop it into the future. But I will never go out and buy a negative gear property. It makes no sense whatsoever to actually lose money on an investment when you can actually do strategies to get really great capital growth properties that will also return your cash flow. And that's something that we've been able to master over the last few years.
There are several moments throughout Ugarte's journey which make him feel like the world was out to get him. However, these helped him to learn an important personal lesson.
There's always that one point in someone's life when there's a set of circumstances, may well it be one or a couple, that hits at about the same time that puts you in a scenario of change. And you don't have any choice but to change, because the bricks just hit you in the face. Well, maybe not the brick. You've had the paper cut and it says, now's the time to... Sorry, now the wind's caught me on this direction too. So now we're at a point where something has to change. Now, we were sitting there in 2010 was the major turning point for me personally. And so we've written a book, my wife and I, The Small is the New Big, Health, Wealth, Love and Happiness. And it's a holistic way of looking at life, making small incremental changes to make a difference in the big scheme of things. Now, in that book, I tell this story about sitting on the estuary of a place up at Coffs Harbour, where we'd go holidays every year, and we would share it with another bunch of TAFE teachers and all of them plumbers, obviously. And I'm sitting on the side of the estuary there, and by stealth, one of my mate's kids, who was about 8-year-old at the time, came up out of the water and looked at me and said, "You're Jenny Craig's biggest challenge."
Even though Ugarte took this as a little joke initially, it really cut to his core.
Now, for that, it was, everyone laughed, and even I laughed, but it really cut to my core. And for me, I didn't actually think that I was overweight, but every time I took a new job in TAFE New South Wales, from part-time teacher to full-time teacher, I put on 5 kilos. And then from full-time to head teacher, I put on 5 kilos. And from head teacher to assistant director of business, I put on 5 kilos. So I was essentially 16 kilos overweight for my size. Now, I'm not a tall fellow, right? I'm quite short. I'm 5'1", I think, or 5'3" in the old scale. And when you're 16 kilos overweight at that sort of, when you should be about 63 and you're weighing 16 more, that was a huge impression on me, that I thought I was actually, and I had all the excuses in the world, I'd had 2 knee reconstructions, and I'd hit 30 and all that sort of stuff that went through my head that said, and they were all just excuses. They're all just crap that I fed my brain, right? That kid has just given me the most honesty that anyone would ever give me. And sometimes with kids, we actually don't give them the ability to be able to tell the truth. We stop them from doing it. And when I wrote this and his mother read the story, she says, "I'm so sorry. I can't believe it." I said, "Do you not see how beneficial that was to me, that your son did that? I have to be forever in the rest of my life grateful for him saying that to me." Now, that was one occurrence.
The second instance was related to the job that he had been passionate about for so many years. Although it was an emotional time for him, it would prove to have a profound impact on his situation in the future.
Because I loved my job so much. Now, this is a problem. When you love your job and you're 36 grand negative, it doesn't really occur to you that your life is going in a shambles, because you just love turning up work. And as a teacher, I was turning up and doing something that I loved, and I still love doing, right? So everything was great. I had a 6-week holiday at the end of the year. We've gone away to Coffs Harbour. This kid's told me that I'm overweight. I go back. I turn up on the 27th of January 2010, one day after our anniversary. I walk up the stairs and walk into my office, and I've got a new boss. And that new boss is the sort of guy that, they put in a corner somewhere so they can't do damage. The problem was it was in the corner of our plumbing office. And that new boss, he tore my world apart in 2 days. And to this day, I'm still emotional about not being able to secure myself in a position that was $36,000 negative. And then all of a sudden you go, holy crap, how do I get out? $694 was coming out of my pocket every Monday morning to pay for the negative gearing. And so when I didn't love my job, 2 days after that, I went home. My wife saw how unhappy I was, and I was completely unhappy. The kids became unhappy, and the pain of negative gearing really got to start, inflicting into my soul. It actually started to tear me apart. And for the first time in many years, after loving my job, I'm now in a position where I hate my job, and I'm no longer passionate about the thing that I'm passionate about, and I need to get out, and I need to get out quick, right? And so, we were fortunate that we were in a position, someone had said, go and see this positive cash flow seminar, and eventually we went to do that. Now, for me, those 2 pivotal moments 1 month apart were the one basis of change that I needed to have, the pain that I needed to have to change. Now, having worked at different levels with different people on their own personal development, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, helping people move forward, I know that there's two styles of people. There are people that are led by the carrot. So, when you talk about the donkey and putting a carrot in front of it, people that are led by what's the goal, what's out there, I really want to achieve that, I want to get it. Then you've got the opposite, and using the same donkey, the only way to move some donkeys forward is by whipping them on the ass and making a move. And for me, unfortunately, my makeup and my motivations and attitudes are that style of person. So you have to whip me pretty hard, and that pain was something that made a big difference, a massive difference to our change and our evolution to where we sit today.
The game-changing moment that changed Ugarte's way of thinking around his property investing journey occurred when he understood positive cash flow.
My aha moment came when I sat in a positive cash flow seminar. And 2 years earlier, I'd been told, go and see the seminar. It's amazing. You'll be able to learn how to get positive gearing out of property. And I said, don't be stupid. Can't you see? This is like a pyramid building system. What they'll do is they'll get you in there. It's a multi-level marketer. You'll sign up, and then someone signs up underneath you, and the person on top gets all the money. And that was the ignorance that I was traveling with, right? So after that had happened, after those two incidents had happened, I went to that same person that told me to go and see the positive cash flow property, and he had left work. He no longer needed a job because he bought positive cash flow property. I said, show me what you got. I don't understand how this works because I know property and I know negative gearing and I know that you can't do positive gearing. He said, well, here's my properties. This is how much it costs me. This is how much it earns. And then at the end of the year, I've got money left in the bank account. I went, are you serious? He goes, yep, there's the figures. You have a look at them. And so I went, okay, beautiful. I said, I have to go and see this person that you went to see, and I want to make sure that I do the same thing. And so I sat in that seminar and I looked up there and I said, wow, those figures are amazing. They're unbelievable. Now, they were obviously all success stories, and I was convinced straight away. And I said, I've got to do this. This is something I've got to do.
With this understanding came the realization that things needed to change.
So this is an interesting part of my makeup. I come from a European household, so having watched my parents grow up and knowing that 80% of our makeup has been put into our brains by the age of 6, I'm watching my parents operate. My dad earned the money, my dad came home, my mum did the cleaning, my mum looked after the kids. So I essentially grew into what we call a standard European chauvinistic pig, right? And so I've married Christine, and we're well into marriage, obviously, now. And I'm making all the decisions in the house, and I turn up to this seminar and I watch this lady speak, and she's amazing. I go to the back of the room and I sign my wife up to the program, right? So I go home. I look back now and I just it makes me shudder. I go back home and I say to my wife, look, I've done something amazing for you, Christine. I've signed you up to this program. What I need you to do is learn it. Come back to me once you've learnt it all. Tell me what it's about, and then I'll decide what we're going to buy. And it's so hilarious to think that was the way it was. Now, I turned up there. I was smart enough to actually put myself on as a partner. I turned up at the boot camp, and about one day, probably halfway through the first day, I remember thinking to myself, this is not something that you can learn by proxy. Like, you've got to make a serious attempt. You've just had 2 life-changing occurrences happen to you. Someone's told you you're fat and someone else has ruined your job. You need to make a change, and it's not going to happen by acting the way that you used to act. And so for me, sitting in that seminar was a pivotal moment. Now, just an add-on to the fact that some people agree that the universe sends you certain signals to so that you get the message. And so I was obviously the European chauvinist in the family and making the decisions for my wife and all the rest of it. And lo and behold, just to make sure that I got a message, we have been blessed with, and absolutely blessed with, 4 daughters. And so, and so I have to stop now and say to the universe, I get it. I understand the power of women. And really, our businesses really never took off until I let Christine be in control of them.
So, inspired by Ugarte's property investing journey, we will keep the conversation going with him in a future episode of Property Investory. We will hear about how his mindset has evolved through experience,
I want to be in a position where I have the point to be able to get up in the morning and choose what I want to do, and which is help other people.
Delve into the nuts and bolts of his strategy.
We got to a point where we bought a couple of positive cash flow properties, and some of them were manufactured and some of them were already. So they're already set up and already cash flow positive, and they were the times where you could go out and just buy it straight up.
And that's next time in a future episode of Property Investory. Also, if you haven't subscribed to receive your free property case studies that I only send out exclusively via email, you can text me your email address to 04 99 88 10 40 to subscribe. These real case studies are from experienced property investors where they share specific numbers of their portfolio, the strategies, and much more. Simply text me your email address to 04 99 88 10 40 to get your free case studies. Thanks for listening.